Millions of people around the world watched a crew of 6 women fly to space and back on board Blue Origin's new Shepard rocket. Much of the attention before and after the flight focused on superstar celebrities, the musician Katy Perry and TV host Gayle King. But alongside them was a rocket scientist whose lifelong journey to the stars was even more incredible. On this episode of the show, we'll tell the extraordinary story of the astronaut, entrepreneur, and educator Aisha Bowe.
If you would have told me that one day I would be sitting here with a flight crew jacket on, talking to you about going to space, I would have thought that that story was a lofty one too.
It was all a dream.
The dream that I never thought would come true is coming true right now. That dream was space. I want you to live your wildest, biggest dream because I am.
I'm Riz Khan. With family roots in the Bahamas and little interest in maths or science, my guest this week was an unlikely candidate to become a NASA rocket scientist. She was advised to pursue a career in beauty products, cosmetology, but chose the route to the cosmos instead. On the way, she became an engineer, entrepreneur, mentor, philanthropist, and fashion icon. Blue Origin's female-only flight to the stars featured several famous faces, attracting widespread interest, followed by a social media backlash from those who questioned its value and purpose. But for Aisha Bowe, her journey to space was always about much more than the view. Aisha, thank you for joining the show. Now, take us back to launch day. What was going through your mind that morning, and how did it feel knowing that you were finally about to realize your dream of going into space?
Riz, I have waited my entire life for this moment, and oh, was it worth it? To have the opportunity to travel at about 2,200 miles an hour and to fly up to the international boundary of space, which is the Kármán line, and see the Earth. I was just overcome with emotion because as someone who spent their career working at NASA, who's traveled around the world working with kids, who's been really excited about space and science, to see Earth from that view, I knew that everything I had gone through to be in that moment was worth it.
How significant was it that you were part of an all-female crew? What did that add to the experience?
Well, I think that there are headlines and things that are designed to create a lot of engagement. And then there's what I was focused on, which was the science. And as someone who's traveled around the world speaking in order to inspire women and non-traditional people to enter the field, my big takeaway was that I got to conduct science with HBCU, which in the United States is a historically Black college and university. We had a predominantly female-led research team, which was amazing. We flight qualified hardware, which could be used for research in the future. And we were able to demonstrate that we could genetically sequence plants in space during a suborbital flight. And all of these things combined are why not only do I think the flight was meaningful, but it did represent some firsts for science.
We'll talk more about that, but describe what the atmosphere was like inside the capsule as the countdown began.
As the countdown began, it was electric.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, command engine start, 2, 1, ignition. Liftoff. New Shepard has cleared the tower.
I think anybody going into space, there's this moment of just awe and wonder as you really think about all the engineering and all the progress that had to go into the moment. When I started working at NASA, it was not possible to go to space on a commercial flight with Blue Origin. And I can remember thinking to myself that one day I'll apply to be a NASA astronaut in the astronaut corps, but that I wanted to find ways to get involved and contribute before I felt ready to do that. And so during the countdown, I was sitting in the seat, and as we started to go down from 10, I realized that I was getting ready to achieve one of my lifelong goals of not only going to space, but taking that next step in my journey of becoming an astronaut and hopefully getting to one day fly for NASA.
Well, the key thing is that it's a remarkable experience that very few people get. What was the first thing that went through your mind as the rocket took off?
As the rocket took off, I was actually thinking about a colleague of mine who I'm lucky enough to call a mentee. When I was working at NASA, I had the privilege of meeting a 13-year-old girl named Claire. And Claire approached me at an aviation museum day. So like we used to go out and speak in the community with astronaut ice cream, and we take what we were doing at work and share it with kids. And she comes up to me and she says, "I want to be an aerospace engineer." And I said, "Okay, well, let me give you my card." Well, this 13-year-old girl, she emailed me. Like she literally sent me an email. I give my card to adults all the time and they don't even email me, right? And so I decided to invite her in to follow me at work. And so 13 became 16. She's now one of my mentees. And from that relationship, she ended up deciding that she was going to pursue aerospace engineering. She studied at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And you'll never believe this, she worked on the very same rocket engine I was flying on. And so when I sat down that day, it was more than just me achieving my goal of going to space. I actually had the opportunity to fly on a rocket engine that I watched someone who I've mentored since she was 13 help create.
And I'll get onto your remarkable path to NASA a bit later. But let me ask you what it feels like to reach 2,300 miles per hour, basically 3 times the speed of sound.
It was an incredible feeling. I mean, I had trained for this moment over the course of the last 2 years. And if anybody has the opportunity outside of this conversation to pop into my Instagram or my social media, they'll see me jumping out of planes and, training in a FAA human rated centrifuge. And so by the time we hit Mach 3, I was smiling from ear to ear. I looked at the GoPro footage and it was just pure joy because I was ready, I was prepared, and I was excited to be able to capture the moment.
So we have some footage of you in that centrifuge.
She's having too much fun.
That's 68. Yeah, how you doing?
I feel good.
I love that comment from the training guy saying that you were having too much fun. Now, I have to ask you, in terms of training for the mission, apart from experiencing things like the centrifuge, how did you prepare for this kind of special mission, both personally and professionally?
As someone who's always been excited by spaceflight, the first thing I did was go to the FAA regulations on commercial spaceflight. There are actually guidelines that are best practices to prepare for space missions. And so I looked at the guidelines and I said, I want to do all of these things. And really the criteria boils down to you must train in a manner that demonstrates that your body is prepared to go to space. And so I found the centrifuge.
I'm here at the NASTAR facility starting training for my flight. Are you ready? Let's go.
This is going to be your office this afternoon.
Yes.
Hey, you're ready for space.
You heard the space shuttle bump? It's like,
Oh!
In circle.
Congratulations, you just completed all the required training flights to qualify for your flight to space.
I literally cannot imagine training for space and not going through this. I'm really happy that I had an opportunity to not only experience this.
I found a L-39 Albatross flight, which is a fighter jet, and that was a lot of fun. Half of the time I couldn't determine if I was training or having like a lot of fun, but I went through what the FAA kind of lays out as much as I could as a private citizen, and I'm really hoping to expand upon my training in the future and do more.
I'm sure that there's no way, no matter how much training you do, that you could actually compare any of that with the actual liftoff experience.
Oh, there are some things that are really close. I'll tell you that the FAA Human Rated Centrifuge that I flew at the NASA facility, they've trained over 500 astronauts, and they had the flight profiles from multiple vehicles. And so I had the opportunity to experience what they would simulate as a SpaceX launch. I also experienced the Virgin Galactic launch, and I had a rocket assisted launch, which was really, really, really fast. So we hit 6 Gs in the simulation. On the way up, we experienced 3, but when we fell back to Earth, we hit about 5. And that's when, let's just say, things got really real, because 5 times your body weight sitting on your chest is no joke. I know there's been some conversation about our suits in the media, but one of the things I really appreciated about the suit was that it was compressive and it helped prevent against G-force induced loss of consciousness, which can occur when you're, pulling a lot of G's.
I can assure you that no kind of suit, no matter how advanced, could actually make me feel comfortable with 5 times my weight sitting on me. Now, of course, you actually get to see something that so few people get to do. So describe the view from the capsule, what you saw, and of course, how it made you feel.
It's impossible to go through this experience and come back unchanged. I hope that in the future, not only do more people have the opportunity to go, but that going to space on these sorts of suborbital flights will be as routine as flying. Seeing the Earth, it was a awe-inspiring moment that took me days to process. When I came home, I walked around my neighborhood just trying to find the words to describe what it's like to look at a moving, breathing Earth. And since that moment, I have felt a commitment that some, have detailed in the overview effect, where I feel more of a responsibility to not only protect Earth, but to talk about the experience of seeing Earth from space and to champion more people going on these commercial flights, because there's nothing more beautiful than having the opportunity to see humanity from up high.
Aisha, I'm sure that you're more than familiar with the famous blue marble picture, the picture of the planet Earth taken back in 1972. That was actually the first time it was seen that way. 1972 is not that long ago, and it was taken by a person, not a satellite. Now, you got to see Earth from that remarkable perspective. You also got to experience weightlessness. How did that feel, and were there any funny moments in zero gravity while you were up there?
Yes. I thought, okay, you're going to pull off your seatbelt and you're going to float up lightly. Well, right before we hit the launch pad, I had the privilege of talking to 2 individuals. And so NASA astronauts, Jeanette Epps and Joan Higginbotham, were there as part of my cohort. And I asked them, I was like, hey, ladies, what do I need to know about microgravity? And they were like, Aisha, whatever you do, don't do too much. You are so buoyant. Wow. I mean, the moment you take off your seatbelt, you just float right up. And so for me, I was really nervous that I was going to hit the top of the capsule. So the seatbelt comes off, and then I immediately lift up, and there's a moment of shock where I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt like I was floating away like a balloon. And so I grab onto the handholds, and I realized that sit-ups actually helped for something. And I was like, okay, I've got my hands here, and I'll be able to get my feet into the toe hold and orient myself. But it takes just a small touch to move around in microgravity. It's really the most elegant sort of feeling of being able to just turn your body entirely upside down, like I did in the capsule, with just a mere turn of my wrist.
That's remarkable. My knees would thank me forever if I could get to weightlessness. Sadly, it's not going to happen. Now, I know the support of your family has been very important to you, and your late father had a space dream of his own. Tell me about that and what he said to you when you were chosen for your space mission.
I struggled to find the words because my dad came to the United States in the 80s from the Bahamas to study science in Michigan. And it was his goal to work at NASA. And while he didn't achieve that, he instilled in me that I had the ability to do more. And when I found myself in high school, I just didn't think that math or science was for me. And it was my dad that said, you can do this. And so I went from community college to studying aerospace at the University of Michigan and working at NASA. And when we lost him earlier this year, I didn't know that I was actually going to be able to do this. I wasn't sure how I was going to find the energy or the strength because I never thought that I would get to achieve one of the greatest goals in my life without my dad. And so when you look at the footage of me in the capsule, some people see me floating a patch that says Bahamas. And while that is a nod to my heritage and my father, it's also a nod towards history. The new Shepard vehicle follows the trajectory of Alan Shepard in 1961. And most people know that New Shepard took off in the United States, but they don't know where it landed. It landed in Grand Bahama in the Bahamas. And so for me to have the ability to complete his dream, to have my 92-year-old grandfather, who was born at a time where there were not aircraft on his island, fly to see me take a rocket to space, was just a beautiful full circle moment that I will forever be grateful for.
Well, God bless your late father, Aisha. I'm sure you must have felt his presence with you during that profound experience.
I did. And, he said via text to me, when I told him that Blue Origin was going to fly and I was going to be part of the crew, he said, Aisha, all the people who have come before me who are no longer here, and all the people who will come after you that you have not met will forever be proud of the courage that you've displayed in this moment. And so during the mission, my call sign was Exuma, which is a nod to the island my grandfather was born almost 100 years ago.
Thanks for explaining that. I wanted to ask you about the meaning of your call sign, but since you mentioned your 92-year-old grandfather, I want to refer to a comment you've made in the past about his experience with getting around during much of his early life was on a horse.
Yes. Not only was he on horses, he was somebody who was really instrumental in moving the nation forward. And so from Exuma to going to NASA, my grandfather was always somebody that said, if you don't see it, create it. He was never somebody that was okay with the status quo. And I think you see a lot of that spirit in me today.
Well, Aisha, apart from the Bahamas flag patch you took, what other special mementos did you take up there with you?
Well, let me start with the fun one. One of the things that brought me comfort as a kid is a dish called conch chowder. And so I actually had dehydrated conch chowder, which is a Bahamian, it's just a cultural phenomenon. We love conch chowder. I had it dehydrated and I flew it in my pocket, which I think that's the first conch that has made it to space. An artifact that I'm really proud to have on loan from the Museum of Flight in Seattle. And that's the American flag that Pete Conrad, who was the third person to walk on the moon, had in his personal flight bag. And the reason I had that was because Nancy Conrad, his wife, lent it to me. She's a mentor, and she really wanted me to carry something that was a powerful symbol of the past, the present, and the future of space. That flag will be returned to the Museum of Flight in Seattle, and it will now have 2 flown in space certificates, one from the Apollo mission and one from mine. And so students and people are going to be able to go in and learn not only about the past flight, but the flight that we just completed now and into the future. And the last, which I'm really excited about, was I spent the last couple years traveling around the world trying to bring space down to Earth. And I did this by collecting the hopes and the dreams of people who didn't see space as a career for them. Through the US State Department, I've been to India, I've been to Kenya, I've been to the Bahamas, I've been to Mongolia, I've been to Kyrgyzstan. And on these postcards, I had students write their dreams. And so I flew dreams to space, which will be returned to them, thanks to Jeff and Lauren. And the postage will return these postcards back to the dreamers. And I can't wait to get those responses. Like they're going to go into their mailbox and they're going to see your dream flew to space and returned back to you. Now, what are you going to do with that, right? You got to make the dream come true.
Fantastic. So many wonderful mementos. Well, sadly, your father never got to see your mission into space, but at least your grandfather did. How did he react once he was there at the launch site?
Well, my grandfather was overcome with emotion, and he had a wonderful person to comfort him in Oprah. I was really surprised for him because I was not, being in the capsule and being part of the flight, I couldn't really see what was going on. And I start getting all these messages from my family members, and it's just my grandpa and Oprah, my grandpa and Oprah. And they were like, wait a second, you told us you're going to space. Oh my goodness, like you actually did it. And wow. So I think that not only did he have a good day, in his words, he told me that he had one of the best days of his life.
Yes, I saw Oprah giving your grandfather a hug as they watched it all happen.
Amazing.
But tell me about the nickname you and your all-female team came up with for the mission, the Six Taking Up Space.
Well, we really wanted to find a way to kind of share what we thought this mission meant. And for us, we felt like we were taking up space. We were making it available. We are more than likely one of the most watched space missions in modern time.
1, 2, 3, taking up space!
I actually will tell you a funny story. I was walking around my neighborhood and there's a middle school. And there was a lot of parents getting their kids, off to school, and they're like holding their hand, like, come on, come on, come on. And the kids are like looking at me and they're like, oh my gosh, like waving at me and they're saying hi. And I think that was one of the successful things that this mission accomplished. We've inspired the youth. And so there's this wonderful part of me that's excited about what the students are going to do with it because they're writing me, they're sending me messages. They're really excited to have had the opportunity to see themselves in space.
And you said you loved the flight suit. Was it because of the way it protected you from the multiple G-forces you experienced during takeoff and landing? Or was it the fashion? Because I noticed you had flares on the legs.
Well, on a practical kind of note, I've worn flight suits before. And what I'll tell you is that they were not necessarily designed for my physiology. One of the experiments that I conducted gathered my biometric data, and I wore it on my chest, and I was actually able to secure it and make sure that it was snug because the suit was designed specifically for me. All the suits were in custom. They were done in detail. And in addition to the benefits of the G's and the compression, which was very much so needed on the way down, let me tell you, I finally had something that was custom designed for my needs and that was able to not only accommodate my experiments, but I was able to operate in a way where I could conduct multiple experiments, I was comfortable, and I could move efficiently around in the cabin.
Earlier on, you had mentioned some of the experiments you had conducted. Were there any experiments you'd have liked to have conducted that you didn't get a chance to?
Yes, I would have liked to have done a brain scan. After the flight, I felt so different than before. And I think, you hear, oh, this will change you, but I really wanted to better understand how my brain changed after the flight because I've been writing and I've been dreaming and I've been thinking with renewed clarity and a feeling and a passion that I have not had, I think, ever in my life. In addition to that, I'm interested in continuing to monitor my vitals because I gathered data prior to the flight, during, and immediately after. But after taking off that bio button, I'd like to continue to gather data on myself that could inform future research.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, after the flight, you shared some powerful reflections on the trip. Can you recall what you said and what you meant by those phrases?
After the flight, I'll tell you, it was a bit of a blur. But from what I recall, I was in awe of having the opportunity to fly. I was excited about all the people that had the opportunity to witness and, celebrate the moment with us. And I was really looking forward to being able to share what it was that I learned with not only the people here in the United States, but on tour around the world.
And you said, dream it, plan it, go and do it. Sometimes reality is wrong.
Yes, and that's actually one of my slogans. Look, everything that I've accomplished in life was something that somebody told me that I could not do. I'm beginning to think that if you tell me that I can't, it actually means can. And so I've adopted a mindset of like failure is success and progress. And I think that so many people are holding on to something that someone told them that they could not do, thinking that that person knew something about them that they didn't and they don't. And so when I decided to go to Michigan Aerospace, it wasn't because someone told me I could do it. When I decided to found my first company, it wasn't because someone told me that I could do it. And when I decided that I wanted to go to space, it was all the same, right? Aisha, there's no way you can do it. And so to be in that moment where every single one of my dreams had come true, I just wanted to use it as an opportunity to inspire other people to go do the same.
Well, naturally, everyone who manages this rare kind of mission into space says they come back changed. In what way do you feel it changed you, personally and professionally, especially after the long path from your early years that you took to get there?
It's given me a renewed perspective on what I can accomplish. One of the things that I want to share with you beyond the headline is that I'm the first African American woman to raise and own her seat. I spent years working with organizations deciding to say, how can we make this more equitable? If I can raise the money, if I can do the research, I can put forward a model that other people can emulate. My entire life and career has been about creating a pathway for other people to follow. And that's one of the stories I'm excited to share as I travel around the world. It's not only about entrepreneurship and inspiration and science, it's about creating sustainable pathways for other people to have the same experiences that I've had.
I want to touch on your remarkable achievements in the world of entrepreneurship as well in just a moment. But let me ask you, in the same way people say that they see planet Earth differently after seeing it from space, how did it change your view of the Earth?
I feel so much appreciation for the little things. I can remember the number of sunsets that I caught last year, and it was less than 10. Today, I got up and I'm looking at everything, right? The plants, the animals. I just feel a sense of joy. I feel a sense of privilege, and I feel honored because there's no mistakes here on Earth. We are truly a blessing, and everybody has a purpose. And Earth, when you see it suspended against the darkness of space, it is impossible to not believe that we are all here for a reason, and we have to protect this planet. We have to share this. We have to go out and make it possible for other people to see it because it's such a beautiful thing. It's overwhelming when you get to see it from space.
Well, as you know, Aisha, we live in a world of social media and global interaction that is not always very nice or fair. And as you know, there's been some talk since the mission questioning the use of the term astronaut in connection with these short flights into space. How do you regard that debate, and what does the word astronaut mean to you?
Well, I think that in aerospace, there's always been a delineation between a NASA astronaut, per se, and a citizen astronaut. I think that the word citizen astronaut here is maybe more appropriate, but I think we're kind of getting into trying to classify an experience. And the reality of it is that it doesn't necessarily matter what people call me. What I feel we all are explorers. And when you think about what's happening in commercial space, it's really similar to the early days of air travel, where people were literally getting in these kind of makeshift airplanes and they're like trying to figure out how to fly around, and they're explorers. And that's exactly what we are. We're explorers, we're pushing the boundary. And I really welcome individuals to try to find a way to create, naming that maybe is a little bit more reflective of the accomplishment as opposed to trying to be divisive.
Well, considering that valid point, were you surprised? I mean, how did you regard the fact that there was a backlash in social media? And did it diminish your experience in any way?
It's impossible for me to have the experience of seeing my lifelong goal be achieved. I'm grateful. I'm honored. I feel a sense of responsibility to go and share what I saw with the world and to build new bridges and to build new pathways. I think the conversation is healthy. I was excited because, look, as a science person, I have been involved in some very, very cool projects, but they've never been spoken about this much. Regardless of whether or not you were for it or you were against it, you were talking about it. And I think that's powerful because as we move into the next generation of space, we need involvement of all people. We need people to understand why it's powerful. And outside of the public discourse, we literally had middle schools, high schools, people around the world saw this mission. And so for me, I think we achieved a lot of what I would hope to get out of the mission was I brought visibility to the science that I was looking to conduct. And I had the opportunity to inspire people who may not have previously known about me or the work that was being done.
And no doubt you've become a role model for many young women. People like Claire, the intern whom you mentioned, who ended up working on the rocket used for your Blue Origin mission. But do you think that gender played a role in that negative reaction among some people?
No, I think we're at a period of time where we're making a lot of progress. And what's important is that we need all people. This commercial flight was the first, but it certainly won't be the last. When you look at what Blue Origin has done, they flew a 90-year-old, Ed Dwight. He was the first African-American astronaut selected by NASA. And in doing so, they righted a historic wrong. They also flew Wally Funk, who is a female pilot who has more hours in a plane than I think most people on the planet of Earth. I think the conversations about who can fly and how they fly are valid. And I think that opening up the door and talking about what we want the future of space and the future of aviation to look like, I don't necessarily think it's about the outcome.
Well, listen, the Prime Minister of the Bahamas personally sent you a congratulations message, and a lot of young people are now very inspired by what you've accomplished. What sort of messages have those youngsters shared with you?
Well, we had a 6-year-old at the launch. Her name is Zofia. And Zofia was tagging along with her family that day. And there's a beautiful picture of her looking up at me as we're parading to the launch pad. And all I can remember is her gaze. She was locked on. And I could tell that she was engaged. I could tell that she was inspired, but I really wouldn't know how inspired until after. It was a week after the launch, and I got a message from her dad, and it was an illustration. And it was the capsule coming down with the parachutes popping out. And he said to me, "I think I've got a problem." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Zofia said that she wants to go to space, but she's going to wait until she's a little bit older, maybe about 9. That, to me, I mean, it really sums up what's happening in my inbox and on my phone. There are so many people telling me that not only were they proud and they're excited, but that it renewed their dreams. I've had that as well with adults who grew up seeing space shuttle launches and were really motivated, inspired by them, and who were really excited to see that this launch was getting such wide coverage and sort of asked the question of, do you think that there are going to be more launches with this wide coverage in the future? And I hope so. I hope so for NASA missions. I hope so for Blue Origin missions. I hope so for Virgin Galactic missions. I hope so for all missions.
And your trip into space was also celebrated with a viewing party by staff and students at Washtenaw Community College, where your academic journey began. Looking back at that time, how far away did the dream of space feel then?
I mean, it felt like just that. It felt like a dream. Washtenaw Community College was where my life began because I met a lot of individuals who they didn't care about what I demonstrated on paper before. They were focused on pouring into me, and I started to drown out the noise and only focus on the things that I wanted to achieve. And so one of the other stories about this launch that I'm really excited to share in the coming days is a student named Nathan Perry, who was a Washtenaw Community College student who was actually working on the launch site. And he's a Blue Origin employee, and we just have this connection because we both started from humble beginnings, from community college to NASA, and to space. And the last thing, which completely and totally, like, I cried when I saw this, I'll tell you, Riz. My community college sent cardboard cutouts of me to the middle school, to the high school, and they had one available for their launch party. And they invited people to come in and actually take pictures of it and share it because it was literally making dreams real, right? This person went to community college. She's now on this rocket, and we have community college graduates who are working to make sure that she's safe alongside people that she's mentored.
Well, you carved the path. It's really inspiring. So I wonder what sparked your shift from originally being uninterested in STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, to actually becoming a NASA engineer.
I struggled with self-doubt. I had low self-esteem, and I spent so many days looking at myself in the mirror and not liking my reflection. And after a while, as a young person, it's really painful. And I started to say, Aisha, what would it be like if you felt good? What would it be like if you liked what you saw in the mirror? And what I realized was that I had committed to all of the negative things I thought about myself, replaying day after day after day. And so I took control of the mental narrative. And I deliberately started to say, you know what? I'm not going to allow you to put yourself down in your mind. I'm going to tell you that you can do it. I'm going to tell you that you are brave. I'm going to tell you that you should have courage. And once I started replaying that in my mind over and over again, I started to realize that I actually felt differently. I felt lighter. And I started to achieve and I started to accomplish things. I think that young persons around the world are in many circumstances under a lot of pressure. It can be so hard for them. And so once I separated the pressure I felt from trying to figure out how I, at 17, was going to study something that would allow me to pay for my life for the rest of my years on the planet and just focus on my goals and my dreams, I really started to flourish.
Well, it's good that happened because there's the incredible story of how you almost missed out on your opportunity to join NASA. That was a close call that almost ruined your dream.
Yeah, because as I was working on the self-esteem, I mean, it's not an overnight job. It was something that I had to practice. And even to this day, and on launch day, I got up and in my mind, I affirmed myself. I said, Aisha, you have spent your entire life planning and preparing to be here. Today, you are going to get up, you are going to be present, you are going to do good science, you're going to be focused, and you're going to get everything out of this experience. It took me years to get there because as a college student, I didn't realize the power of being kind to myself. I didn't realize the power of finding a community that could pour into me. And so I had to build those things over the years. And as I've traveled around the world with the State Department or invited talks, I think that a lot of individuals have potential that is just untapped because they have not been taught how to harness the noise that can be in your mind and how to affirm yourself and how to make sure that you give yourself the best possible foundation for success, which is optimism and self-love.
And Aisha, I want to discuss how your story progressed because when you left NASA, you founded your own company, STEM Board, that advises the US government. What drove that decision and what kind of impact has it had?
Well, it started with people like Claire. I was meeting students and I was realizing that I had more to give. I loved working for NASA. It is a dream job and I highly recommend it to anybody who's thinking about it. But in my job, my focus was engineering. I didn't have the opportunity to travel around and talk to students and share my journey as much as I would have liked to. And what I realized was that people thought that I was in my job because I was a genius, because everything was perfect, and because I had the best upbringing. And the reality of that was it wasn't quite true. I had a lot of challenges, I had a lot of failures, I had a lot of setbacks, but it was how I chose to look at them that made the difference in the long run. And once I started doing this, I said, what if I created a company? And once again, people laughed in my face, but I was dog sitting this dog who was amazing, and the dog told me I could do it, right? So I was like, animals, they're your friends, like, go do it. And so I said, well, wouldn't it be really cool if I actually built a company from scratch and it worked? Wouldn't other people maybe feel inspired and do the same? Well, 12 years ago, I built Stemboard. We're an engineering firm. We've twice been recognized by Inc. 5000 as one of the fastest growing companies in America. We have been also recognized for hiring and retainment of veterans in the United States and the good works that we've done around the world. And it was all because I just decided that I would make it up, right? I made up the logo, I made up the company. And today I have engineers who work for me full time in multiple states. And that's what we do. You know, we make dreams reality. And we really stand as a model for what other people could do with their potential in the future.
And if that wasn't enough, as a young woman starting and running such a successful company, you had to go and start another one called Lingo. What are you hoping to solve with that business?
Well, I'll tell you, Lingo was a mistake, but it was a wonderful mistake. You know, running one company is enough. It's definitely a lot of responsibility on a day-to-day basis. But Lingo came as an act of love. We as STEM board engineers were donating our time to help nonprofits in the community. And what we realized was that these nonprofits were going out and they were teaching kids, they were doing STEM workshops, but they may not have had the time or the expertise to develop the content and the curricula in-house. And so we decided to do that for one of our nonprofit partners, and the pandemic happened. And we said, we have to help these nonprofits. We have to help the parents and the teachers at home. And so in the course of 1 year, we made, we delivered, and we helped instruct over 5,000 kids. And we said, whoa, this is going to need to be its own thing because there's such a need for it. Today, we supported over 10,000 students. My mom actually is Employee of the Month every month in Lingo. That's right. She went from being my mom to working in one of my startups, which is like very fun. And I've had the opportunity to see what students in other countries get out of our kits because I've taught them in Kenya. I actually taught them in India. I had a 5-city tour through India where I taught Lingo, and the kids just loved it. From Calcutta to Dubai, to Delhi. And I actually brought some Lingo kits to Dubai too. So I just have had them all over the place. And it's been wonderful to see the response that students have had.
And Aisha, I should point out that you're a big supporter of Club for the Future, the Blue Origin nonprofit division. Tell me about that.
Club for the Future helps students send postcards to space. Postcards to space. I love the concept because it brings space down to earth. And it also allows for students to have the opportunity to, write their dreams, share them, and send them. And so Club for the Future not only travels around and provides these postcards, but they talk about the rocket. They talk about commercial space travel. And it's a really great way for people to get engaged no matter where they are.
So that was your role for Club Future on this mission?
Yes. So from 2022, I gathered up all my postcards and I delivered them to Club for the Future for processing. After the mission, they're going to take them off of the rocket and they're going to return them to the dreamers.
Understood. Well, one thing that people who know you are aware of is that you're not just an entrepreneur, not just obviously smart and academically accomplished as a person who's now been to space, an astronaut, but you're also quite an activist and advocate.
I would love to see more people go into space. It is a wonderful deal.
So at a time when spending on DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion programs, are being cut back, what gives you optimism about the future of science in the US?
What gives me optimism is the power of the person. And what I mean by that is I'm literally having a conversation with you about my STEM career, about the science that I was able to do on the mission, about the funds that I was able to raise with organizations to inhabit the seat, and about a moment that was seen by millions of people around the world, and one which I'm going to spend the rest of my life sharing. And I'm just one person. Imagine the power that comes from this conversation and other people deciding that they have the power to shape the future the way that they want it to be. And that's really what I want to leave people with, right? I dreamed it, I planned it, I did it, and so can you. I understand that there are a lot of things happening, not only in the United States, but around the world that will be discussed for years to come. But I think the question is, what can you do in order to shape the future that you want?
And of course, times have changed. And from a time when you couldn't imagine the opportunity to travel to space that has been developed through projects such as Blue Origin, it's now become a possible dream for many more people, something for which you advocate. But given the huge cost, is such an ambition even practical?
I wonder if when Henry Ford designed vehicles, he thought that they would be as popular as they are today, right? I mean, I wonder the same things about the Wright brothers. I think with all great inventions, whether it's ships or aircraft, submarines, I mean, they all kind of started being initially fairly expensive and somewhat out of reach. And you had the individuals who became the early adopters, many of whom were more affluent in society. And then these things became more common. I mean, I still remember getting my first cell phone. I had only seen cell phones on other people. And I know you're probably laughing because you know exactly what that was like, right? When you get your first phone, I'm from the generation where we had one phone, it was in the kitchen, and it had a long cord, and you better hope that your mom cared to give you the message. But now there's more computing power in cell phones than we're on the space shuttle. And so when we talk about innovation, we talk about space flight, what we just witnessed is what is going to eventually drive down the cost so that this will be affordable to all people. And it follows the natural cycle that happens with innovation and early adoption.
Aisha, let's put this into context. I was excited when I saw my first electric typewriter. Looking ahead, what's next for you on Earth or in space? And what's your newest dream?
1 million students with hands-on STEM learning through our Lingo STEM coding kits. In honor of this mission, I actually spent the last year working with my team to develop lessons that bring some of the same space concepts home. We're piloting them here where I live in Virginia, and we just actually partnered with a local school district to roll them out into the schools, which I'm so excited by. And I can't wait to be able to share the joy of space and the skills that are needed to be employable in the future with millions.
Aisha, fantastic. Now, I'm going to end this wonderful interview with something that we like to do with cool people on this show, and that is to ask you around 10 quick-fire questions where you can just answer in 1 or 2 words. You just have to think on your feet. Are you up for that?
I'm up for it.
Cool. Okay. The first one. What's the biggest discovery you'd like to see in space exploration?
Another habitable planet.
Number 2. What's the most important thing an alien should understand about humans?
Humanity is just beautiful. It's compassionate, it's wondrous, and it should be protected.
Number 3, is there anything you would do differently on a second trip to the stars?
I would spend much more time.
Number 4, would you rather return to space yourself or inspire a future astronaut to travel to Mars?
Can I do both? Both.
Why not? Okay, there you go. Number 5, will women close the gender gap in the space workforce within the next 10 years?
I certainly hope so.
Question 6, who's your favorite astronaut and why?
It's hard to pick just one. I absolutely love Jeanette Epps, Joan Higginbotham, Mae Jemison, Katie Coleman, Suni Williams. They're all my favorites. Can I say they're all my favorites?
Of course you can. Well, 7, what's your favorite Katy Perry song?
My favorite Katy Perry song would be Firework.
Nice choice. Question 8. Considering you were told to go into cosmetology and fashion, and considering you've actually become something of a fashion icon, what's the choice? Cosmology or cosmetology?
Cosmology.
Number 9, spacesuits, fashionable or functional?
Both.
I knew you were going to say that.
Prada's designing the newest spacesuits. I mean, it's both.
Fair enough. So then, question 10. Do joyful tears float in zero gravity?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to squeeze out one final question. How would you sum up your experience in space in a single sentence?
The most meaningful thing that has happened to me ever.
Aisha Bowe, congratulations and thank you so much for taking the time to have such a great conversation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Riz.
The remarkable astronaut, Aisha Bowe. That's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe and leave your comments and thoughts. I'm Riz Khan. From me and the team, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.